Welcome to our channel, all friends. If you are new to my channel, please subscribe my channel and press the bell icon to stay update for new videos. Thanks. Let's start new video. In the middle of the room lay a blood-soaked body. Blood was splattered everywhere. It looked as if a wild beast had unleashed its rage mercilessly upon a human being. Right next to the corpse, a woman sat holding her head. Her face was expressionless. She just stared blankly at the body. Suddenly, the sound of police sirens filled the air. Within moments, police officers rushed into the house. The moment their eyes fell on the corpse, they all instinctively covered their faces. The stench in the room was unbearable. The police quickly began their investigation and immediately pulled the woman out of the room, placing her into the police van. This entire operation had been prompted by the neighbors, and from the scene, the woman named Noreen was arrested. A short while later, she was sitting in the police station with her head bowed, while a female police officer kept interrogating her again and again. "Tell me, who committed this murder? Why and how?" Noreen, her fingers nervously intertwined, was biting her lips in silence. In a sudden burst of anger, the policewoman grabbed Noreen's hair, lifted her face up, stared straight into her eyes and shouted, "Tell me, who killed him? Who slaughtered a living human being with such cruelty?" Tears silently rolled down from Noreen's eyes and soaked into her shirt. "Crying won't help you now, girl. These fake tears won't save you from my wrath. You have to speak the truth, every bit of it. Otherwise, I'll make sure you suffer so much that the truth will pour out of your mouth on its own." The officer gave her hair another harsh tug, and Noreen let out a cry. "Start from the beginning. Tell me everything." The policewoman tightened her grip further, and Noreen began spilling her story like a stream. "My name is Noreen. I was married to Kamran when I was just 17 years old. Kamran was much older than me. He was 30, and had a terribly short temper. When he got a young and beautiful wife like me, he made my life a living hell. I wasn't allowed to even step outside the door or talk to anyone. He always looked at me with suspicion and bombarded me with bizarre and hurtful questions. Life with Kamran became extremely difficult. Then in the 3rd month of our marriage, I found out I was pregnant. My mother said, "Noreen, watch. The moment Kamran hears he's going to be a father, he'll become so loving and kind toward you." Hearing my mother's comforting words gave me a little hope. But when I returned home and told Kamran that I had felt sick at my mom's place and she had taken me to the doctor, who confirmed I was pregnant, instead of being happy, Kamran slapped me hard across the face. "Whose child is this?" he barked. Hearing those words from my own husband made the ground slip from under my feet. I never imagined that he would question my character. I broke down in tears and said, "Kamran, what are you saying? This is your child." Kamran looked at me with disgust and spat on my face. "If it was my child, you wouldn't have gone to the doctor with your mother in the dead of night. That's why you keep insisting on staying at your parents' place. You must be having an affair there." His words left me not only heartbroken, but utterly shocked. I had no idea how to convince him of my innocence. Through sobs, I pleaded, "Kamran, I swear on anyone you ask, this child is yours. I have no relationship with anyone else." But Kamran still refused to believe me. If his mother hadn't stepped in to stop him, he might have beaten me to death right then and there. From that day on, Kamran began watching me with even more suspicion. The restrictions on me became stricter than ever. I spent my entire day within the 4 walls of the house, busy with chores. And when my husband returned home, I not only endured his taunts, but also his physical abuse. Because of Kamran's constant torment, I lost my first pregnancy in the 3rd month. My health deteriorated severely. I was bedridden with illness, and even worse, my mental state took a heavy toll. My mother-in-law was a good woman. She always tried to make her son understand, but perhaps it was my beauty that had become my curse. Kamran believed that someone as beautiful as me couldn't possibly stay faithful to an ordinary man like him. He was convinced I must be involved with someone else. I spent an entire year trying to prove that I had no connection with anyone. Life kept tightening its grip around me, and then, once again, I became pregnant. This time, I went to the doctor with my mother-in-law. She strictly instructed Kamran to take good care of me and not to harass me during the pregnancy. By the grace of God, this time Kamran believed that the child was his. So at least regarding the child, he didn't say anything to me. But when I gave birth to a daughter, he turned against me all over again. I wanted a son, and you gave me a daughter, he snapped. Now things will only get worse. Before, I only had to keep an eye on you. Now I'll have to watch your daughter too. Hearing my husband say this made my heart sink. I couldn't believe that he would question the character of a newborn baby, a child who didn't even have the awareness of the world yet. Out of fear, I began to break down. I shared my worries with my mother, and she simply said, "With time, everything will be okay. Just try to make it work with your husband and never give him any reason to doubt you." After consoling me, my mother sent me back to my husband's house. I arrived home from the hospital with my baby girl in my arms. My mother-in-law warmly embraced me, but my husband didn't even bother to ask how I was. Life continued to grow more painful for me. I tried to move forward, focusing solely on my daughter. I locked myself away within the house. I didn't talk to anyone, didn't go to the rooftop, didn't even go near the front door. The windows of my room remained shut at all times, and I kept every curtain drawn. I did everything I could to avoid giving my husband even the slightest reason to get upset or harm me or my daughter. But even then, he would find some excuse to raise his hand against me. Every time, my mother-in-law would step in to defend me. But 5 years later, she too passed away, leaving me completely alone with my daughter. There had been complications during my daughter's birth, and because of that, I could no longer conceive. But I never told my husband this. He constantly longed for a son, and in his eyes, I was becoming more and more of a disappointment. He didn't know I was infertile now, and I made sure he didn't find out. I knew the doors of my mother's home were closed to me. If I wanted to survive, I had to keep this truth hidden. So I would always say, "Pray that we are blessed with a son, just like we were blessed with a daughter." And my husband would fall silent, because in his mind, at least I wasn't barren. But after my mother-in-law's death, my husband began doing something strange. Every day, before leaving for work, he started locking me inside the house from the outside. His elder brother was married and lived separately with his wife, since the two brothers never got along. My sister-in-law used to visit us occasionally, but ever since my husband started locking the house, even she stopped coming. Another year passed like this. Then one evening, my sister-in-law came to visit. When she saw my condition, she was heartbroken. Her husband was a kind and caring man. She said to me, "How are you even living like this? I can only imagine how hard it must be to stay with someone as suspicious as Kamran. Your daughter is growing up now. How long will you both live in this environment? Why don't you speak up for yourself? Talk to your husband and put an end to this abuse." She said all of this out of sympathy, but unfortunately at that very moment, Kamran returned home and overheard our conversation. He insulted my sister-in-law and threw her out of the house. Then he warned me strictly to never speak to her again. She had always been kind to me, sometimes sending food because she knew I wasn't able to cook well. My husband would only bring home the bare minimum groceries, and I had to manage meals from that. So I always looked forward to the delicious food my sister-in-law prepared and sent for me. Gradually, her son Shahid began to grow up. He would sneak into our house, sometimes handing me something through the window, sometimes climbing over the neighbor's roof to visit us. Kamran had no idea about Shahid's visits, and I had no intention of telling him either. Over time, I became close friends with Shahid. He was much younger than me, but his words were always sweet and comforting. He became someone I could talk to, a little escape from the prison my life had become. I couldn't even develop such a bond with my own daughter. She was always frightened and withdrawn, keeping herself locked away in her room. In such a life, Shahid felt like a breath of fresh air. I would sit him on my lap, shower him with love, and share my heart with him. He would understand some things while others would go over his head, but he would always smile gently, and slowly, our bond grew stronger. I became more attached to Shahid than to my own daughter. Then when my daughter turned 12, my husband decided to forcefully fix her marriage. I raised a huge fuss about it, but my protests were in vain. My husband's reasoning was that since my daughter was growing up, it was better to marry her off before she brought any shame to the family. His words burned my heart, leaving it shattered. My daughter had never been to school, had never stepped out of the house, and no one even knew her. Mentally, she was on the brink of being disturbed. How could she possibly bring shame upon the family? What hurt me even more was that my husband had chosen an older man for her, a man much older than her. This thought consumed me. My husband had always doubted me because of my age and beauty, and now his own daughter was about to fall into the same trap. I begged Kamran, crying, to at least marry her off to a man her own age. But he refused, saying that he had made the best decision for her future. And so, my husband married off my daughter to a man of his own age, with simplicity and ease, and I couldn't do anything to stop it. The day after the wedding, when Kamran went off to work, Shahid came running to me. He had already heard the news of my daughter's marriage. He said to me, "Aunt, don't worry, just pray that wherever Swara is, she remains happy." He sat with me for a long time, holding my hand, and I, unable to contain my tears, rested my head on his shoulder, crying my heart out. The weight on my heart seemed like it would never lift. And then, what I had feared most happened. My only daughter was taken so far away from me that I yearned to see her face once more. Kamran informed me that Swara's husband had taken her to another city, and they would now live there. I cried so much over this, especially because she didn't even come to say goodbye before leaving. But my husband didn't seem to care at all. To him, it felt like he had done something right, like he had removed a huge burden from his shoulders. He seemed convinced that either I or my daughter would bring shame to the family one day, even though that wasn't true. Shahid comforted me, and I wiped away my tears, but my heart constantly ached for my daughter. When Shahid saw that I was completely alone, he started visiting me even more often. I spent more time with him, and my sister-in-law knew how much I was struggling, so she never stopped Shahid from coming. Then one day, Shahid brought me a mobile phone and said, "Whenever you face any trouble or need anything, just call me. But don't tell my uncle about this phone." I thanked Shahid, realizing how mature and responsible he had become at just 16, balancing his own home responsibilities while understanding mine. I hid the phone from my husband, and whenever I needed something, I would call Shahid to come over. Time passed, and I spent my youth in silence. I was now 45 years old. Shahid at 17 had grown even more handsome and looked more mature. Every time he came to visit me, seeing him made me happy. A lot had changed in life, but one thing that hadn't changed was Kamran's behavior. Even now, he doubted me just like he did in the beginning, and he would always lock the door from outside before leaving. The neighbors were also very surprised by his actions, but no one ever intervened. Sometimes the door would be locked, and Kamran wouldn't return for an entire night. Every moment without him felt like a struggle for me. One such night, the rain was pouring heavily. It was 10 p.m. and Kamran still hadn't come home. The rain kept getting heavier, and I was filled with fear. I was certain that Kamran wouldn't return until morning because the rain was so intense, and the visibility was zero. His office was far away, so it seemed impossible for him to make it back. But with the thunder and lightning, I was terrified. I waited for some time, but as my fear grew, I called Shahid and explained the situation to him. He reassured me, saying, "You don't need to worry, I will come to you right now." I immediately refused, telling him, "No, it's raining too heavily. Don't come in this weather." But he wouldn't listen. He had made a duplicate key to the house, so it was now easy for him to come over. Within half an hour, he was at my doorstep. He opened the door with the duplicate key and entered. The moment I saw him, I started crying and clung to him because I was so scared. He sat me on the bed, gave me water, and sat down at my feet. "You worry too much. It's just a little while, the rain will stop soon, and your uncle will be back," he said, trying to calm me down. I quickly drank the water and told Shahid, "You should go back now. Who knows when your uncle will come? If the door is unlocked from outside, he'll make my life even harder." Shahid replied that the rain is so heavy it's impossible for your uncle to come now. "I just came to check on you so that you wouldn't feel alone." I pulled Shahid to sit beside me on the bed and said, "Thank you so much. I really feel better now, knowing I'm not alone. You always come through in tough times." Shahid lovingly rested his head on my shoulder and said, "I can do anything for you, because I truly love you." Before he could say anything more, the door to the room suddenly flung open, and Kamran walked in. He heard Shahid's words and immediately became furious. He stormed inside and began beating Shahid, hitting him so violently that Shahid's face was covered in blood. Musa, I screamed and shouted, trying to stop Kamran. You're misunderstanding. I was scared alone, so I called Shahid. But because the door was open and he was in my bedroom, you might have misunderstood. Kamran didn't listen. He started hurling insults at me while continuing to beat Shahid. I screamed and tried to save Shahid, but Kamran was in a frenzy. He opened the cupboard, took out his pistol, one he had kept for years for some unknown reason, and aimed it at Shahid. Seeing that, the ground seemed to slip from under my feet. Shahid was like my own child. He meant as much to me as my daughter, Swaira. I rushed forward and stood in front of Shahid, telling him, "Quickly, get out of here, run away." Shahid refused and said, "No, Chachi, he's going to kill you. I'm not leaving you. I won't go anywhere." He grabbed my hand and stood up. I quickly pushed his hand away and said, "Shahid, go away from here. I swear to you." I was more concerned for his life than my own. I'd already seen 3 years of life, and Shahid Watai was just stepping into his youth. He was my sister-in-law's only son, and I didn't want any harm to come to him because of me. That's why I pushed him out of the room and started closing the door. My husband was fuming with anger. He quickly pushed me aside and tried to shoot Shahid, who was standing outside the door. I don't know how, but I managed to turn the pistol towards him, and one bullet went straight through my husband's stomach. It all happened unknowingly. I didn't mean to shoot my husband. He had intended to kill Shahid. I had only tried to protect him, but in an instant, my husband turned away from life. I realized that I had killed him. Shahid stood by me, both of us trembling with fear, but then I realized that this was not his fault, and his presence here was not right anymore. So I urged him to leave and sent him away from my house. The sound of the gunshot had already echoed through the neighborhood, and the neighbors quickly came running. By the time they arrived, Shahid had already left, so no one knew about him. However, they informed the police, and soon they arrived and arrested me. I admit that I shot my husband, but I didn't do it on purpose. After all that I had endured for so many years, if I had wanted to kill him, I would have done so a long time ago. But I didn't want to hurt my husband. I just wanted to save Shahid because he is like my son. As I finished telling my story, I started crying in front of the policewoman. She placed her hand on my head and said, "If what you are saying is the truth, and your neighbors testify in your favor, then rest assured nothing will happen to you." Shahid's testimony and his mother's testimony were crucial. If they had fled, no one could have saved you from trouble. The police searched for Shahid and his mother, bringing them to the police station. Shahid completely told the truth, and his story aligned with what Noreen had already shared. The neighbors also testified in favor of Noreen, and the case went to court. Many people were aware of Kamran's behavior, and even his older brother testified against him. In the court, it was proven that Noreen had not intentionally killed Kamran. He had been a source of trouble for Noreen for a long time. The court acquitted Noreen honorably. When Noreen stepped out of the court, she silently stood in a corner because, for her, nothing remained in the world anymore. Her parents had passed away long ago, and now her only support, her husband, was gone too. She didn't know what to do, but at that moment she heard a familiar voice, her daughter, Sawera. Noreen immediately looked up and saw her daughter standing in front of her. Tears filled Noreen's eyes. Sawera embraced her mother and said, "I'm sorry it took me so long to reach here, but now I know you have been acquitted. I want to take you with me." Sawera introduced Noreen to her husband, who, although much older than her, was very sincere and good-hearted. He had taken Sawera as his treasure and had come to take Noreen with him. Noreen couldn't believe that life could have such a turn. Until now, she had always thought her daughter was living the same kind of troubled life she had. But that wasn't true at all. Her daughter was leading a good life. However, due to her father, she hadn't been able to meet her mother until now. The only barrier between them had been Kamran, but now that wall had collapsed. That's why Sawera had come to take her mother with her. Noreen began her journey with her daughter to another city, starting a new life. Sometimes the truth is not what is seen, but what is unseen. Kamran had always looked at his beautiful wife with suspicious eyes, thinking that one day she would betray him. But in reality, that was never the case. Noreen had never been an unfaithful wife.